Hey everyone, this is Ole Sharanki from Laddering Your Success, and you're listening to the LYS podcast.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome one and all to EduSteps, the online mentoring podcast powered by Laddering Your Success. I'm Ole Sharanki, co-founder of Laddering Your Success, and I'm honored to be joined, as always, by my fellow co-founder and LYS creator, Festus Amoye. Festus, how you doing today, brother?
I'm good. I'm just enjoying life, enjoying family, enjoying work, so it's all good. It's all good.
Awesome, man. Yeah, man. We're thankful, man. Our voices are getting a little bit clearer. Normally it's because I know how busy Festus can be sometimes. It's, oh, man, if it's not one thing, it's the other. It's September.
Or the congestion or what do they call the mucus buildup?
Yeah. We're also blessed to be joined once again by the future doctor of education, Jamark Crawford. Jamark, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. I love it, man. Glad to have you. Glad that you're here with us. So today we're going to be talking about some of the big issues that we'll be facing in 2025 and beyond. So right now, there are a lot of things happening. Some we know about, some we don't. But all of them will affect us either as a taxpayer, as a parent, as a student, as an educator, or even just as an everyday person who depends on important services like healthcare, police, firefighters, and other essential workers like doctors, plumbers, and electricians. The future of these important jobs and industries is closely tied to elections and some of the leaders that we choose. And of course, we're in the thick of election season right now. I believe we're less than 2 months away from the election. And so these elections are very important because those are the leaders that we choose. And those leaders will pick other people. Sometimes they're appointed by elected leaders to kind of be in charge of one of those industries I had mentioned before. We usually focus on how parents, teachers, and students shape our communities and our schools. But as we learn more, as we've delved more, as we've grown in LYS, we see that these issues reach much further than that. And we've kind of always known that, but I think we understand the system, let's say, a little bit more. And so what we're going to be doing for the next couple of weeks is we're going to be talking about some of the issues that are going to be really, really big, not just in 2025, but 2026 and on, right? We have about 3 months left in the year. And so as we move on, we're going to discuss some of these major issues and kind of go in on how they will be impacted in the future. First one we're going to be talking about is the impact of COVID-19, right? So we're probably 4 years removed. I'd say we're somewhere around there, 4 years removed from COVID. And still we are dealing with a lot of the issues that we faced from COVID. And so I think we already had some issues going into COVID, those issues. And now we're left with it's almost like a COVID hurricane or a COVID tornado hit, and we're left with the rubble, right? And so we're slowly trying to pick up and rebuild, if you will. And it's been a slow process. We're still behind, right? And because as I said earlier, it was something that was already there, right? And so the first question that I have for everyone is, in what ways has the pandemic exacerbated existing educational inequalities? And how can these be addressed moving forward? In what ways has the pandemic exacerbated the existing educational inequalities? And how can these be addressed moving forward? How do we move forward to kind of bring back some of these educational inequalities that we faced?
So I would say it's a mix, because when we talk about education, we have to really, really, really underline and underscore what we mean about education. Again, there's two types of education: formal and informal. And I think what we've seen was that in COVID, during that time period, the informal education trumped the formal education, right? It was those who thought it's a good idea to have internet at home. It's a good idea to have computers at home. It's a good idea to have access to certain things at home that ended up, kind of winning the educational lottery. Now, the argument can be made from a SES perspective about access to those things. But I think when you really sit down and look at it during that time period, there were many supplies given out. And I'm talking about from a major city perspective. I can't really speak to the rural areas of the country, right? So if you're talking about major cities, corporations like Microsoft, Dell, they were just giving out laptops, they were giving out hotspots, they were just giving these things out. Then on top of that, you had people giving STEMI checks. I know the STEMI checks weren't that much, but the sad part is, and this is where I say that informal education trumped the formal education, is that informally, if education was a priority to not just the parents of the children, but also the family of the children, they could have put together the resources to make sure that the education got done, right? So my uncle could have said, hey, here's a little piece of my STEMI. Hey, here goes some bus fares so you could get down. They're not giving out computers on this side of town. They're going to the other side of town. So here's some bus fare to the other side of town. There could have been other things done on the informal basis to help shore up that formal education. And so to me, that is where the divide is coming in and coming greater and greater and greater. The divide is coming in that is greater on what are you doing in your free time to get educated? What are you doing in your out of school time to get educated? There's a lot of initiatives now for out of school time to try to catch up, right? But if the individual does not make that a priority, it does not matter how many programs you throw at it. It doesn't matter how many dollars you throw at it. None of that stuff matters if the being, knowing, doing factor isn't there. And the being, is this person's character geared towards wanting to be educated? If they don't want to be educated, they're going to be miseducated. At this point, there's too much information. There literally is too much information available. And the thing is, now here comes the knowing factor. Do you know what resources are available and how to use them? It's just that simple. Do you know that they're giving out laptops at the library? You could just like you check out a book, you could check out a laptop. Do you know they have free Wi-Fi over there? So are you willing to take the steps to get to that library? Oh, the library is too far. Well, is poverty too close? Like, come on, man. Like, we gotta get to a point where we stop making excuses. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that really is bothering me about this whole kind of post, COVID area, new world area. There's a lot of excuses being made, and I don't see a lot of solutions, because the thing is, to me, let's say a tree is falling and the tree it got blown over by the wind and somebody's standing there and there's enough time to get out the way. Do you just blame the wind and say, oh man, shucks, the wind? Or do you say, hey, take every opportunity to take every single step you could take to get out the way? Finally, it's the doing. What are you doing? Forget about who's elected. Forget about who's your principal. Forget about all of that stuff. Because the reality is all of that is temporary to your life, okay? Whoever is elected is temporary to your life. Whoever your principal is temporary to your life. Whoever your teacher is temporary to your life. Okay, and sometimes what we do is we give these people too much space in our heads, and then they take over our whole entire life. And we need to not do that going forward. So that's it.
Hey, LYS fam, it's Ole. Thanks so much for listening to LYS. I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk to the parents. That's right, mom and dad. Parents, prepare your child for their best educational fit after high school with our comprehensive LYS Parents Guidebook. Our helpful guide includes a range of activities designed to help you better understand your child's unique gifts and abilities. Additionally, we provide valuable insights into the student loan debt crisis and offer practical tips on how to avoid accumulating large amounts of debt. Our ebook also includes a wealth of information on scholarships, grants, and payment exemptions that can help guide your child towards a bright and successful future. With our expert guidance, you can rest assured that your child is well prepared to make informed decisions about their education and career path. Don't let your child's future be in jeopardy. Invest in their future today by downloading the LYS Parents Guidebook. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to the show because you know it's some good topics.
All right. So, how has the pandemic exacerbated educational inequalities? I think it's different topics. So I'm trying to do the ones that I can think of. The first one would be the digital divide as far as the access to technology. Students from low income families lacked access to those essential tools. We know what those are, laptops and things of that nature. And then the school districts and programs that did pass out the technology, part of that digital divide was students had access to the technology, but they didn't have the literacy to know how to navigate the technology and how to work it. And so that placed disadvantaged students at a further disadvantage. So that's the digital divide. Then there was the quality of remote learning in the sense of teacher preparation for it. You have teachers who were well versed with technology. For example, I was using the technology before COVID happened. So when it was mandated for us to use that, it was nothing for me and my students because we've been used to it. Well, that's different for a teacher who is more non-technological in their instruction. So they didn't have adequate professional development to know how to use the technology to help their instruction in that case. And then within the quality of remote learning, another piece of that will be engagement and participation, right? You had teachers who had difficulty doing instruction through remote learning to where they were able to keep their students engaged, right? So you have students just really sitting there not being engaged in the lesson. So that's quality of remote learning. Another piece I think would be the support systems such as parental involvement. Those families who are low SES status, they couldn't really provide as much support for their students because maybe their work schedule and their own obligations. I know everyone's at the home, so let's say they're at home as well. They have to worry about work, so they can't really monitor their child, unlike families who have a higher SES. And then in the same note, with our special education students or our English language learners, they often struggle because since this remote learning was so new, hey, how do those students receive the support they need? Okay. Then there also was another topic would be the impact on mental health. With kids sitting there being on a computer all day and stress from what's going on in the world. So you have that. And then also school funding and the resources gap. The pandemic led to a reduction in school budgets in many areas, and it hit the lower income districts, harder than the wealthy ones. Okay, so you got that. And then another one that's like real important would be the learning loss and the achievement gaps. We always talk, well, us in education, we always talk about the summer slide effect, where basically the students lose that information due to the space from one school year to the next. That was very dramatic or increased during the pandemic era and online learning. And I think the other part, so those are all of the ways that inequalities became greater. And I think the other part of your question was, what are some things that we can do to kind of bridge that gap? I think for the digital divide, it's having programs out there to offer literacy programs for the parents and students. Like, hey, how do I work this stuff? I need to learn how to work this stuff. If now moving forward, my students are going to be using technology. So like now, I think districts are doing the best they can to go like one to one to where every student has a device, but the students and the families don't know how to work the device, and you have teachers overwhelmed with trying to teach them how to work the device and having to teach at the same time. So I think literacy programs could be available to help the families learn how to work the technology, and that can close that knowledge gap. I think the districts can invest more in professional development and learning how to use the resources to improve technology within their instruction. So just in case in the future something like this ever happen again, the teachers are well prepared to use the resources that they have. I think as far as I talked about the summer slide that happened during the pandemic, I think I don't know how realistic this is, but the district's coming up with summer and after school programs that can help, what do I want to say? That can help support those students with extra resources to get the help that they need. So that's what I'm thinking, as well as parent and community involvement. Hey, let's educate everybody within this access, in certain kind of summer programs, to where not only are we aiding the kids, but we're aiding the parents. So like we're teaching the parents as well as the kids, so we can all like work together on these educational outcomes. Again, so it's about being proactive and not reactive, just in case something like this happen. Like, to some degree, everyone is getting some kind of knowledge. So those are just my thoughts. I know I said a lot, but
Absolutely. No worries. Well said. Thank y'all.
Hey, LYS fam. It's Ole once again. These days, many families are busy but want personalized attention. We at Laddering Your Success understand this dilemma and have created a unique approach to help guide you and your child with personal development tools to build a life of purpose. This intimate approach is helpful for those parents that feel the need to have a focused heart-to-heart conversation deciding on the next steps after high school. We provide individual post-secondary planning, virtual customized college and career counseling, and scholarship guidance and planning. Our one-on-one sessions are tailored to each individual student to maximize their potential in the post-secondary realm. With our guidance, your child will be able to make their dreams a reality. Don't wait. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to business on this podcast.
So thank y'all both so much. I want to go into this next question. What are the long-term implications, right? What are the long-term implications of the pandemic-induced learning loss on students' future opportunities and economic outcomes? So now we've talked about how has it made those educational inequalities worse, right? What can we do to help them? But what are the long-term implications of pandemic-induced learning loss on students' future opportunities and economic outcomes? Because remember, our kids were already at a disadvantage before COVID. A lot of kids were already disadvantaged, whether it be through digital, social, academic, psychological, emotional, SEL, whatever category you want to put it. A lot of kids were already behind. Now you had this entire pandemic that made issues that were small big, and issues that were big, just uncontrollable. So what are the long-term implications of pandemic-induced learning loss on students' future opportunities and economic outcomes?
I think that could be lower academic achievement, which could be reflected through graduation rates. And then I think reduce college enrollment and attainment, if that's something that students try to pursue, limited career opportunities, and that will lead to lower lifetime earnings and pay. And I think the social economic inequality will continue to expand, and also reduced workforce competitiveness. So that's what I think so far.
Yeah, I think those are the factors he named are huge. To me, when I look at where kids are, the SES is really the only factor. And I'm not sure how much matters to real value. And I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, because like SES is everything. But when you talk about all the divides that we have now, racial divides, class divides, economic divides. One thing that I know from growing up from an immigrant family was that there were things that we did that you took pride in no matter what. How you kept your clothes clean, how you kept your, if you got a shirt dirty, you were washing it by hand that same day. Don't let that stain sit in. You know what I'm saying? Get that stain out before it sits in. There's other things there. Now, don't get me wrong, we did not have as much. But now that I'm growing up and I see myself having more, I scratch my head to how much do I value the little things that I do have? You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of one of those things is that, sometimes when people don't have as much, they value things more. But I also think they tend to value life more. They tend to value people more because there's just not as much stuff to value. And so to me, that's a big question mark. But I also think that in terms of what can we do to improve things, I think creating spaces where, again, you have a variety of people meet. That's one thing to me I love about church is that you could have a person who's a CEO of a company sit next to a person who's a janitor, and they don't know it because they're not in that hierarchical role, you know what I'm saying, on the job. On the job, you this, on this, I'm this. But when we come to sit here, we're all just listening. You know what I mean? And sometimes those interactions that are derived from proximity, derived from the encouragement of adhering to the word and things like that, that challenges us all. And so to me, I think creating more spaces like that will help even with some of these divides, because there was a young lady we had on here not too long ago. It sounded like her parents were doing their best. It didn't sound like she came from very low means, but the fact that she was still confused, even though her parents had a higher SES, even though she did have other siblings who went to college and went to school, but there's still confusion there. And so those to me is like, the more we create these spaces where different people have different viewpoints, I think is going to be very helpful.
Wonderful. I love those points. Real quick, I wanted to say, Crawford, I forgot to tell you, man, I love that you got that brown skull cap. You just reminded me that you're ready for fall. I see you, man. Professor, to your point, in regards, and first of all, thank you both again for that. In regards to proximity, I want y'all to keep that in mind for this next question. How can educational systems better prepare for future disruptions similar to COVID-19? So let's do our little rewind. Let's go back 2020. We're in the classroom. I remember teachers had pool noodles. They're about 6 feet long, and they would have a student in here have one and student behind. Every student had a pool noodle, so they had the 6 feet. We had masks on. We had hand sanitizer everywhere. Our hand sanitizer was it was almost like they had a thing of hand sanitizer, and then they put like a quarter of glue. A quarter of the thing was with glue, and it had like the sticky consistency, which we hated at the time, but in retrospect was probably smart because that sticky consistency would have kept the hand sanitizer stuck to your hands. But so many things. It was so new. It was new, but it kind of wasn't. I mean, we had Spanish flu pandemics of the past. We've had things in the past, but we haven't had a pandemic with the level of technology that we've had today, right? And so looking back there, right, how can educational systems better prepare for future disruptions similar to COVID-19? God forbid we have another one, right? But if we do, what can we do differently to ensure that a lot of the learning loss, a lot of the inequality that was exacerbated that we had in COVID-19, what can we do to make sure that it doesn't happen again if something similar to COVID-19 happens?
I think preparation, we have to adapt. For this one, I'm specifically talking about, the educators. We can no longer just be comfortable with traditional methods of educating. We have to continue to be lifelong learners. How can I improve myself? How can I evolve with the times in a day and age where technology is everywhere? So we have to develop flexible learning models, such as like blended learning. yes, I can just do pencil and paper and these other methods, but even if that's my preferred way, let me blend technology in there so that in the case of something like that, I have some type of experience with this implementation so that there can be a more smooth transition. I remember during that time, teachers were panicking because they didn't know how to do this, they didn't know how to do that. And I spent so much of my extra time trying to teach teachers just how to use the technology. And for me, I'm like, how some of this stuff, and I don't mean any offense to anybody who's not a technological person, but it's like, how do you not know how to work this when this is part of your job? You just gotta learn to use this stuff. So just just improving our teaching methods and coming up with different ways to keep the students engaged through technology that's more than just give them an assignment and have to do the assignment. So that's what I would task for the teachers. For the people who are over that, like the districts, make sure they have their teachers prepared so when they have to do the mandatory professional development, they need to think about this technological infrastructure, have that in mind. How can we prepare our teachers? Let's look at these different learning management systems and actually teach them how to use the learning management systems in these professional developments. This is where the teachers have to become the student. Let's develop a finished product because you learn through doing. Like instead of just sitting there, have someone tell us you can do this, and show us, make us do it so we can at least have some kind of experience with that technology. I also think keeping in mind being proactive, let's have a support in place for those vulnerable students like special education, which will go into, okay, let's try the best way we can. Let's pull these parents in so we can show them how to work these things as well, and show them the strategies that we use in the classroom to best support their students in whatever way that may look, so that if a situation like that happens and the parents are at home, they know how to best support their child, because it's a different way to support your child at home and support that child with needs educationally and academically. Those are two complete different things. So I think sharing those strategies with the parents can help for those students as well. And I think the districts and the school, the different areas have to have contingency plans in place, protocols. Okay, this happened, we were not prepared for it. So let's just have something in place that if something similar happens, we have a way to communicate with our community, all stakeholders, parents, our teachers. This is how we're going to do, so we can roll this stuff out. So that's all I got for now.
Hey, LYS fam, it's Ole. If there's one thing I love, it's something free. I'm talking free 99, un gratis. No shipping or handling fees, no gotcha fees, nothing like that. With that being said, if you're graduating soon or thinking about college or need a nudge or help to decide, then our free ebook, 10 Things to Think About Before Going to College, has a very balanced and open minded way of presenting your next steps. It captures broad topics in a personal way by giving students an insightful, interactive, and reflective source of inspiration. It is very beneficial to be able to visualize some of the concepts after high school and apply them directly to you. We all know life, college, and career planning decision making choices for students can be challenging, especially as they near the completion of high school. This book will provide you with a self paced guide to your success beyond academics and into real life. Not only is it free, you can complete this book within a week. This will definitely prepare you for long term success. To get your free copy, simply go to lys.com/students. I mentioned it was free, right? Well, if I didn't, it's free. Like for real, for real. Okay, back to the podcast.
Yeah, I think that I agree a lot of with what Jamark said. I also think that just the human interaction component is key. So when things happen in other countries, in other communities, how often does our leadership get together to say, hey, what was that like? What was that impact on you guys? And you look and somebody who's from another place, they don't have running water in the same way. This other place, they don't have this or that. And so to me, I think, when you look at those different factors, you could kind of rule out and say, kind of almost vicariously, if I was in this situation then. And so to me, I think that's a good thing, is just continuously networking with one another, seeing what works in different communities. So if you're a rural educator who doesn't have all the tools and the internet.
What was that? Oh,
I said if you're a rural educator, yeah, am I saying that right? RURAL, rural?
I'm just giving you a hard time. Go ahead. Talking about technology in rural areas.
I see you trying to make me do that Scooby Doo. So anyway, you know what I'm saying? So you don't have all that technology. Well, what are some ways that you can help your students, and vice versa? You know what I mean? So I think the more that we do those types of things, the better off everybody else is, because in all honesty, I think that's the only way to truly achieve some sense of equity or equality. And I'm one for always lifting people up, but at the same time, they gotta want to be lifted. If those superintendents could get those meetings together, I think that's really helpful.
Wonderful points. Wonderful points. Thank y'all so much for these great answers. I had taken a couple notes earlier, and so as we go down to the last question, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that really stood out to me. First thing that came to mind, and I put this in bold: generational wealth is not physical, it's mental. I think a lot of times we think of generational wealth as, well, my great granddad had, so many millions of dollars, and that's kind of flowed down. And don't get me wrong, in that aspect, it is physical. But I do also feel that when we talk about inequalities, we're talking about generations of folks who have been privy, who have had access to knowledge, systems, industries that others have not had access to. Whether we like it or not, whether we not want to accept it or not, it could have been because of race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever have you. Right? These are facts. This is proven. These things a lot of these inequalities, they won't change until the majority of our culture changes, primarily at home. One of the things I've heard us say a lot is, if we could get the districts to do this, if we could get the communities to do this, and it's all great. We can have the greatest community-backed stuff, but if the parents aren't taking these things home to their kids, right? Which is, I'm glad both of y'all mentioned that, is sharing whatever we're learning, right, Crawford? You mentioned taking whatever the parents, whatever the teachers are learning, whatever the districts are learning, give it to the parents so the parents can give it to the teachers. The parents can give it to their child, our students. So many times parents have come and have said, I don't know what to do with him or her. And even though that's very frustrating for me as a person who was, parented, I was parented. I'll just say it that way. I was parented. I really am sympathetic and empathetic to parents saying, I want to help my child, I just don't know how to. And that goes to the point of just being able to help the parents help these kids at home, right? So, and I put a little thing in here about, I know we heard about kids, and when we opened up, I talked about how a lot of these things are going to be, this is a very important time that we're in right now. We're at a time where, you may have a kid. You've heard of kids in certain schools who go to school dressed up like a rabbit because they identify as a rabbit, or they identify as this or that. And, you're starting to hear more and more about these things. And then in the same vein, you're hearing about things like Project 2025, right? And the thing I've learned this years ago, I heard it years ago. If you cede your authority to someone, that whoever you cede your authority to will be the person to make decisions. And when you get out and you think about people who have a lot to say, but don't go out and vote or go out and speak at, neighborhood meetings or city council meetings, I think it's very easy for us to look at the grand scheme of national politics, but not thinking about, just like we think about the districts in the community, but we don't think about the parents at home. We think about the national, we think about the US senator, the US congressman or woman, but we don't think about our local politics and how those things really, really affect us. And I think that has to be that change in the culture where we say, hey, we're going to take back, we're going to do what's in the best interest of our kids. The second thing I've noticed is a lot of what you all have said is you all have mentioned a lot of social interaction. So not social media, right? Not being on a phone, not sending things, but person to person. I'm looking at you eye to eye. I'm shaking your hand. I'm patting you on the back. I'm giving you a hug. We're having these conversations. And I think we're missing a lot of that. I went out to the dollar store. My mom asked me to buy her some clear nail polish. I went to the Dollar Tree. I saw two of my former students. All right. He was out there. He called me. He didn't even call me Mr. Sharunki. He said Sharunki. Oh, I can't do nothing to him. Put him on my knee, spank him. I'm like, what's going on? How's it going? Right. I had to meet them where they're at. One of them pulled down the window. He looked like Snoop Dogg and Baby Boy the way he pulled down the window. He's like, oh, so-and-so in the car over there. He pulled down his window looking like Snoop Dogg. You know that meme of Snoop Dogg pulling down the window and Baby Boy? He was like, what's up? And I'm chopping it up with him, asking him about the football game. Played Iowa. He goes to Elsig school in the A-Leaf. They lost to Iowa Colony. I said, what's going on? He said, we're going to be all right. I said, hey, that's what's up. I was like, what number are you now? And I had another student who plays receiver. I was like, what number? I'll be sure to see y'all soon. But you got to get out there. You got to meet them where they're at, right? You got to meet folks where they're at. And that's one of the ways that we can create a lot of this change that we're talking. So I love those answers. Before we go to the last question, anyone have anything? Anything they wanted to drop? We're good so far? Good? Okay. So Crawford, real quick, I love the point about sharing the parents again. Great point. And also, to your point about blended learning, what role should technology play in post-pandemic education? And how can it be used to enhance learning without increasing stress for educators and students? Because I know that was something that you had mentioned earlier.
So us utilizing blended learning, and that's basically a mix of in person and online. And so what that does is it's not too far either way. We're not here just in person doing everything on pencil and paper. That might not be the best use of your time. And then also it's not just all computer where everything is on a computer. What you want to do is leverage the technology. With AI, there's so many different programs out there that can adjust the learning materials based on the student's need and their progress, and that saves time within that way, where there's other time that we can use to pour in other aspects of the student needs. There's a program that's out there. It's called you guys can look this up when you get time. It's called 2-Hour Learning, right? And this program is every day. The students only engage in academic content for 2 hours a day, and it's split between math, reading, science, language arts, and social studies. But they're only engaging with it 2 hours a day. And what they're doing is they're leveraging the technology to where it's actually focused on what the kid needs, right? After that 2 hours, the teachers are spending more time with the students and investing in activities that develop entrepreneurship, life skills, arts, and curiosity type of activities that engages the students' intellect in other ways of just simply learning how to read, solving math problems, doing social studies. They're experiencing things in action in the real world that correlates to what they're learning. And they're basically learning how to problem solve in real life at their age level, of course, interacting with other students. And so it's really, really cool. And within this program, it outperforms our traditional school setup compared to like public school, to where you have students in school 8 hours a day just doing academics for 8 hours. And they talk about like, well, people are questioning, hey, how if these kids are only doing academic subjects for 2 hours a day, but yet y'all are outperforming our kids because they're leveraging the technology to where it's not wasting time. It's going right to where the kids need. And the problem with teaching, just me teaching alone, if I'm in a classroom with 20 to 25 students, I cannot hit the individual need. It's more difficult for me to do that. So as a teacher, as best I can, I do have to differentiate, but I also kind of got to generalize certain things when I have kids that are at different levels, especially in the low SES educational setting. That's a lot difficult. And then you got the people who are over me saying, Crawford, you can't stay on this. You got to move on. You got to move on. You got to move on. We're so forced to move on because of time that kid hasn't developed the understanding, and you're constantly going on and going on and going on, and they're getting further behind because if they didn't understand the core concept, they're not going to understand the other concepts that build on top of that. But if you are able to leverage the technology that focuses on that kid's need and build on that, that is how they're saving time and only doing academic subjects for 2 hours a day. And the rest of the day, we're going to pour into you in other ways to where outside of here, if you want to go to college, fine. If you want to be an entrepreneur, fine. If you want to learn how to do finances, fine. If you are more interested in art, expression, fine. How to communicate with your peers. And these days, we don't even know how to communicate with our peers, to talk in front of others. And it works on those other social aspects of being productive citizens. So those are my thoughts on that.
I would say the biggest thing is almost creating a community sharing program where we say, hey, you have this, I have this, let's see how this can work together. I think, when you mention Project 2025, one things to me with everything, is like, let's tell the whole story. There's other different agendas out there as well. And one of those agendas says, you'll own nothing and be happy. You know what I mean? And so some people say, yeah, that's great. But that depends on where they're taking it from. So if somebody just ran up in your pockets, I bet you wouldn't be happy. But because it's happening away from you, you don't really know the difference. And so I think one of those things is that can be shared from both is how can we creatively create this community space in which everybody gets what they need. And I think that's the thing, is that one view looks at it from hey, let the institutions do it, let the powers that be do it, and one looks at it from individual's right to self-determine. And so I think, all in all, we have to create those spaces where that sharing takes place. So.
Wonderful. I love it. Let me look. I'm going to make sure I get that last question correct. So I love the idea of the community sharing program. I think that is truly, truly awesome. To both of your points, they both require us to look at people, right? We're looking at people face to face. And, I told you about this Festus yesterday. I saw an awesome conversation with Simon Sinek, who's a well-noted, I guess I'll call him strategist, thinker, author, who does a lot of work with just interpersonal relationships in business and scaling a business and how to work with people to motivate people to do amazing things, and Trevor Noah. And they were just talking about how in the last, just in the last generation, so let's just say millennials, right? We'll say Gen X and millennials and down, we've kind of lost sense of people, just being able to interact and getting to know people. I'll give you a really good example. Crawford sent a text yesterday, and there was a picnic, and Crawford said, man, I hope you guys can come. I really miss y'all. And I thought, and I said, yeah, man, it's been a while since I've seen Crawford. Mind you, I see Crawford every Sunday on the call, but we haven't seen face to face, right? And so we were. I always, it didn't. My brain just told me this one day. We were designed to be around people. Yet now, in this day, right now as we speak, we are probably more isolated than we ever have been. And I'm not going to say being around people is the answer to all of our problems. But I will say, being in close proximity and community will start to help us see things like perspective, start to help us see, like Festus mentioned, hierarchy, right? See people at both sides of or both ends of a certain pole. And I truly believe that's how we start to grow and learn. So this was a wonderful conversation. Next week, we're going to be going into DEI and some of those things that have played out and how those things kind of, how they blossom, if you will, and what's happening.
Olay's trying to get us in trouble. Controversial topics.
Well, and that's part of the thing, though, right? Is you can't have an honest conversation these days without it being controversial, even though it's all it's not matter of factual. It's literally factual. So how do we? And that's a beautiful point, Festus. How do we get to a point where you can't have honest conversations about things without it being controversial? I'll give you a quick example. One of someone who I knew very well during the George Floyd protests and the NBA stuff, he got on Facebook and he was like, "I'm tired of this. I just want to watch my basketball." And I didn't respond. I didn't say anything. But in my mind, I said, "It's nice to finally meet you." I've known him for about 4 or 5 years, but I said, "It's nice to finally meet you." You see, we live in a world where we just kind of we know there are problems, but as a prophet has said so beautifully so many times, we choose to be willingly oblivious to certain things. And when they get put in our face, that fight or flight starts to come and happen to us. And we start to act irrationally, right? So I don't want to say any more than that. Wonderful conversation. Be sure to subscribe, Laddering Your Success on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. Folks, for the future Dr. Jamar Crawford, I'm Ole Sharanki. Thank you for listening to Edge Steps powered by Laddering Your Success. Festus Samoye, give him the phrase that pays, my good sir.
Listen, there are legitimate excuses for not going to college. There's no excuse for not getting an education. Go ahead, hit that like button if you like what we're talking about and you want to hear more. Hit the subscribe button if you want to get the notification, and definitely hit the share button with somebody who you know needs to hear this. All right, we'll see you on the next episode.
Oh, you still there? Well, thank you so much for listening to the LYS podcast.